Good evening, everybody. My name is Martin Docherty-Hughes. I'm the Member of Parliament for West Dunbartonshire and the Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Blockchain. And I'm delighted to welcome our panellists this evening and also advisory board members, as well as all of you who are watching either at home or at work, or even could be sitting in the back of your car to this, the 19th APPG meeting. And tonight we will be talking about and discussing blockchain for government. We'll be challenging our speakers on how blockchain, or if you want to use it, distributed ledger technology can support service delivery for national and local governments, which is the right infrastructure for governments to build their appliances in a cost-effective and interoperable manner, and what data democratization, or what is it, and how can it help the public sector. But before I go on, I just want to say a few words to the Big Innovation Centre team who are with us tonight. So I do know that due to COVID-19 that you sadly lost a colleague over the last week in India, who was the head of your India division, Abdul Riham, and we are all on the all-party group. I'm sure I speak for all the members of the House of Commons and the members of the House of Lords. Very sorry to hear that news and send our condolences to his family and to all the team who he has worked with over the last couple of years. Especially at these difficult times, just reminds us all that COVID is still with us. Delighted to also welcome Chris Holmes, a member of the House of Lords, a colleague of myself in Westminster, Benjamin Welby, Sayali, Borole, John Collomosse and Tirath Virdee, who will be speaking just in a few moments. But before I introduce them, I'm going to ask the Director of the Big Innovation Centre, Birgitte, to come in and say a few words. Over to you, Birgitte.
Thank you very much, Martin. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It was a very sad loss to lose a colleague of ours due to COVID-19. But this is clearly the role of the COVID is very strong. So we all have to look out for it. So what I want to say about blockchain for government here, we have discussed blockchain for government all the way back to the beginning of 2018. And clearly made the aspects of blockchain is how it can support public services. Some of the things we discussed in the early days was, of course, the purpose of blockchain for government and why we're using blockchain for which type of government services, and the security and the ethics around it, and the sustainability and the scaling of it. But also some of the things we have discussed previously, which I'm sure we have lots of updates on now, is the operational excellence. How easy it is for the public sector to be operationalizing the blockchain and using it, and the service excellence. Does it solve the problem, whether it's related to tax or health or research grants or pension or or trade? And what's the product excellence? What is a good blockchain for government? What does it look like? So for that, I will hand over to the presenters and back to Martin. But it is a really very, very interesting topic that we keep coming back to. And the blockchain for government, of course, is really a great opportunity to level up public services. So thank you from me.
Thank you, Birgitte, and thank you for those words. Keen to hear what our panellists have got to say. I think it goes without question that those who seek to be in Parliament, especially in this part of the world, in liberal democracies, always recognise the value and worth of improving governance. And I'll be interested to hear how our panellists think the role of blockchain in enhancing government delivery, whether at national or local level. And I'd personally be interested in how we utilise that to strengthen liberal democracy. So it'll be interesting to hear. So I'm going to go straight on to our first speaker, Chris Holmes, Lord Holmes of Richmond, member of the House of Lords, the upper chamber of the UK Parliament. He's been a passionate advocate for the potential of technology and the opportunities it presents to society. Has an interest in his expertise is heavily focused on understanding how technologies can serve us all. And Chris published back in, I believe, 2017, but it's been updated since, a report to the UK government calling on how you can explore how distributed ledger technologies can be used for public good. and he's also a keen, and I have to say very successful Paralympic swimmer, winning a total of 9 gold medals, 5 silvers and 1 bronze. I have to say that's something I never knew about Chris, because when it comes to sport, I'm not going to say much else. And even though I'm a keen watcher of the Paralympics, because some of my own constituents participated in the last one. So Chris, we're going to go over to you. Nice to have you with us, and we'll go direct to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Martin, and a very good evening to fellow panelists and everybody who's on this Zoom call. It's a pleasure to be one of the panelists. As Martin referenced the swimming, which was a long time ago. In fact, if you look for any of the film, it's in black and white. It's that long ago. And I feel, as you mentioned, the medal haul, I should probably make a public apology to everybody. There was 1 bronze, and I'm sorry about that. But there we have it. I feel, carrying on the sporting analogy, for those of you who are of a certain age in the audience as well, I feel with the panelists you have coming after me, I feel a bit like Roger Black on the beginning of that famous 4x4 at the World Championships in 1991, where he did a good first leg, but everybody remembers Chris Akabusi bringing it home for Britain to win gold when we beat the United States on the track, which is quite a stunning thing. For those of you who are under a certain age, you won't have the first idea what I'm talking about, and it probably sounds even more bizarre than some deep algorithmic coding. So I'll move to the purpose of this evening's event. I'd like to talk about 3 areas, really. Firstly, the report I did on distributed ledger technology for public good. Secondly, reducing friction in international trade, paper that I published last year. And thirdly, a touch, but without stealing Sayali's thunder, on the local government work that we did on DLT just last year. So why am I interested in distributed ledger technology, blockchain? Yes, I'm interested in the technology. Yes, I've got a few layers of understanding of it, though if Prof. Collomosse challenges me later, you'll see how many layers he has more than me on the subject. And that interests me, and that's good. It's good brain food. It's good to think into that space, how it actually works in detail. But here's the thing. What interests me the most is how we can use these new technologies to solve pernicious problems that have dogged our society for decades, have meant that we as individuals, as communities, as cities, as local government, as national government, and indeed as a globe, why we've been suboptimal to what we could have been. That's what interests me about new technologies, the purpose that they can be put to unleash potential. And it's why I got involved in gathering a fantastic group of people together in 2017, which resulted in my Distributed Ledger Technology for Public Good, Leadership, Collaboration and Innovation report, really focusing on some key areas of public provision and how and where and why DLT might, not inevitably, but might be able to help, not claiming a silver bullet, not even claiming a bronze one, going back to that medal, but suggesting just this, that it is more than at least worth investigating, worth proof of concepting to see where DLT could make a material difference to public service delivery, and through that, a material difference to our national finances. To take a couple of examples pertinent to the horrific year we've been through from a COVID perspective, what I discovered whilst doing my DLT report was that currently some 25,000 doctor days are spent in proving credentials, identity. Obviously incredibly important. You want to know that the person operating on you or giving you advice is who they say they are, and that they have the skills, the qualifications that they are holding out, that they do have. Incredibly important, but 25,000 doctor days. Imagine through a DLT solution those 25,000 doctor days converted into care. When you go through the border, which potentially we'll all be able to do a lot more of as the year goes on, what does a fusty, dusty book of papery pages with a slightly iffy leather cover really tell us, and really tell the agencies and the authorities what they need to know, what they should want to know, crucially, what they need to know and what they should want to know in real time? Again, a potential DLT solution. That was the purpose of the report, to get proofs of concept stood up across the public sector, state level and at local level, to see where many differences could be made. And it's pleasing that we've traveled quite some distance since I produced and published that report in 2017, updated it in 2018. But what's similarly interesting is not only how far there still is to travel, how much untapped latent potential there still is, but that sense that the pace and the ubiquity, if you will, across government around DLT and around all the new technologies still is far from where we need it to be. So to take another recent example, you may have heard of Brexit. I'm obviously pleased to be the first person on this Zoom call to mention the subject. It's happened, it's behind us, but the consequences, whether one sees them as opportunities or not, still very much abound. Hence why I did a piece of work over the last couple of years around reducing friction in international trade. I chose the Australian UK wine market for this proof of concept. Why not? And what we were able to do was to get everybody collaborating around this possibility of having everything that you needed, right from the grape, right to the bottle, arriving on the table at HMRC, physical details, agri, viniculture details, customs details, trade finance details, everything enabled on a distributed ledger, all of that available in real time for the whole passage of that grape through produce, through transit, right through to the UK. Again, why do it? To prove that we can do things differently, to prove that new technologies such as DLT should never be shiny, shiny tech in search of a solution, but should be brought to bear when we've identified pernicious problems, particularly in the public sector, and how it's not only about that exchange of value, it's about that driver, that generator of value that we can get if we get it right. Again, why I was delighted to get involved with Sayali on the local government DLT paper that we put together with Big Innovation Centre last year. I won't say anything more about that. I know she will go into much more detail. But again, the reason why I was so keen to do that was to show that this technology isn't just about national government, state level. It's not just about big corporates. It has potential for so many different applications, micro, small, medium, and mega. So really, for me, it's about seizing the opportunity. The public sector for public service delivery needs to be at the vanguard of this, so we ensure that every taxpayer's pound is put to best effect. So we unleash all of the talent across government, national and local. And ultimately, I think if we get it right, distributed ledger technology, blockchain, alongside all of the other new technologies, we have the potential to do nothing short of completely reimagining the social contract, the relationship between citizen and state. That's certainly worth getting up in the morning for. Great to be here. Look forward to your questions. Really looking forward to the rest of my fellow panelists. Thank you very much indeed. Back to you, Martin.
Thank you, Chris. That's fantastic to hear. And I'm so glad you mentioned Brexit, not me. I will come back to that later. But there's some really challenges for all of us to think about the utilisation of DLT across a whole range of different levels in the public sector in terms of delivering public services. And thank you for that. We'll come back, of course, to all the panellists for our Q&A at the end of our speaker sessions. Our next speaker is Benjamin Welby, is Principal Analyst, Digital Government and Open Data at the OECD. And his work currently covers service design, delivery, digital identity and digital skills in the public sector. And before joining the OECD, was a lead product manager at the UK government's digital services, and one of his recent publications is The Uncertain Promise of Blockchain for Government. Benjamin, we're going to go straight to you.
Thank you, Martin. Good evening, everybody. As mine says, I am a part of the OECD's Digital Government and Data Unit at the OECD. And within the OECD more broadly, we have a blockchain policy centre, and various streams of work come under that, thinking about the opportunities and challenges that exist for blockchain in society. For us, we've been looking more specifically at the role of blockchain in the public sector over the last few years. And so in 2018, we launched a primer for public servants that really responded to the interest and the appetite that we were hearing about how does blockchain technology fit within government. This paper identified over 200 pilot projects that were happening around the world and made the case for governments to build greater internal knowledge about the technology. In 2019, our working party of senior digital government officials then captured the state of the art of what was happening inside government for both blockchain and artificial intelligence. So the challenges and the opportunities that they were finding when it came to developing strategies, putting funding in place, encouraging adoption. And both of these identified a lot of use, but they also began around the edges to start surfacing questions that people had about whether blockchain was a mainstream solution for government. And so under this title of The Uncertain Promise of Blockchain for Government, we produced this paper that looked at various case studies to see what was going on. And we wanted those case studies to be examples with high adoption that had reached a pivot point, that were no longer just the pilot phases, but also to find out what had stopped pilots from reaching that level. And that's the paper that I'm going to talk about today. And our starting point was to see whether we could determine the appropriateness of blockchain for public sector projects. To help with us doing that, our colleagues in the OECD's Observatory of Public Sector Innovation drew on a model that Deloitte had first coined in 2015, which was based around the idea of 3 V's: viability, valuable, vital. And so this framework offers this neat checklist for assessing the value of any technology. But in the case of blockchain, we're asking, is the idea viable? From a technical point of view, can a service be made to work by deploying a distributed ledger solution? But also, is that valuable? In terms of realizing benefits, will blockchain offer a greater public outcome than other alternatives? And finally, is blockchain vital? In terms of meeting this need, does blockchain add something new and special that really transforms those challenges, or are there alternative and more familiar approaches that would actually address the need more easily and more readily? Our second reflection is that the discussion continues to be very polarized. There are the advocates and there are the skeptics, and that's led to a lot of unhelpful myths floating around when it comes to blockchain in the public sector. We look at 10 of them in the paper. I'm just going to cover 4 of them for you today. And the first myth is that blockchain is disrupting the public sector all around the world. And from our research, we have to say that the answer to that is no. It's not fundamentally changing the public sector in terms of demonstrable, production-ready, high adopted use cases. Those are still very rare. But the second myth, it is impossible to build successful blockchain applications in the public sector, is also not true. There are public sector teams who are working on projects that satisfy the 3 V's and are adding public value. The third myth that we hear is that if it's blockchain, then it has to be big and it has to be disruptive, and it's not a small, low-level tool. But actually, we see that that's just not true either. The use of blockchain can be small, it can be pragmatic. And one of the best established examples that we found is in Estonia, where the use of distributed ledgers is a very small but very integral part of the overall data exchange approach in that country. And then the final myth I just want to share with you is that this idea that the results of projects are contributing to blockchain knowledge. And unfortunately, what we found when we revisited some of the pilots that we'd seen in 2018 was that many of them had disappeared without a trace, and that the lessons of why these projects don't reach that inflection point are being lost. And we need to find a way of having a more honest appraisal of both the negative and the positive experiences with blockchain. In the examples that we studied, we found that there are factors that can help, but also harm the potential success of any project. 5 things we suggest are really crucial. The first is that user needs are really at the heart of the work, and they continue to be the focus of the team. The team are focused on solving the problem, not implementing the technology. Secondly, that there's a really clear value proposition, and that a lot of thinking has gone into understanding the public good that can be derived from this approach. Third of all, there's an appropriateness to the level of technology, which has followed on from that analysis of the benefits, but also an understanding of the needs. Fourth of all, that stakeholders are engaged across the network and the domain in which this project is going to operate. The nature of a distributed ledger means that it's going to have touch points into all sorts of corners of the public sector or the problem space or whatever it is. And finally, that the team itself is really operating in an environment that allows them to experiment, to iterate, and if necessary, change direction. We spoke to one team who had pursued a blockchain-based solution, but in the end, in terms of what success in meeting the need looked like, it meant choosing a more tried and tested and non-distributed solution. And the team was able to do that. But on the flip side, we see elements that make it harder for teams to succeed. First of all, the more disruptive a plan for using blockchain, then the harder it's going to be implemented. It's harder it is to implement it because of its complexity. Second of all, if a project isn't designed to scale from the outset or with scalability in mind, then while that will be really good as a learning exercise, quite a lot of effort might need to then go into making it really work for the whole of society. And finally, the legal and regulatory implications of using an emerging technology, blockchain, can really get in the way of teams being able to deploy this service. They get to a point and suddenly they find they can't go any further. A public sector blockchain is definitely providing fertile ground for experimentation. I don't want to be overly negative. And it continues to split opinion. And while the extent to which pilots have matured into mainstream solutions is quite limited, we're really interested to see what might start to happen through the implementation and the maturing of things like China's blockchain-based services network or the European blockchain services infrastructure, where this underlying technology, we think maybe, could suddenly see quite a growth in the extent to which services that use DLT exist, particularly for crossing borders or where there are multiple actors involved. But overall, our view is that the conversation about public sector blockchain relies on an overall maturity of digital government. And at the OECD, we measure that with our digital government policy framework. But in the context of blockchain, it means 3 things. Firstly, that governments are creating the right environment for using technology and data to meet the needs of society. Strategies are joined up and coherent. Public sector leaders are empowering and create cultures of experimentation, and public sector teams can operate under the governance of effective coordination, access to the right amount of funding, and really good assurance and quality mechanisms that help them to do good work. Those teams also have access to the right skills and capabilities, whether that's because the public sector is investing in those skills or because there's good approaches to commissioning work based on outcomes and good partnership working with external suppliers. And then finally, getting the best out of any technology in the public sector, we would suggest, isn't about a focus on the technology, but about understanding the needs, circumstances, and context of users, and then designing the best solutions for meeting those needs, drawing on the most appropriate tools, which may or may not include blockchain. And what we'd like to see is public sector teams treating blockchain kind of ordinary as just a part of their toolkit, using it where it's viable, valuable and vital, but not under any pressure to do so. Thank you.
Benjamin, thank you so much. Very concise, straightforward, and I have to say, as the co-chair of the all-party group in Estonia, I'm delighted to hear Estonia's utilisation of DLT blockchain highlighted there, and also posing some very interesting issues around the delivery and the utilisation of DLT in the delivering of public services, the rationale, the appropriateness, I think is a very good word. And maybe we'll come back later during the Q&A to the role of China in the utilisation of distributed ledger technology, because I think there's many of us in liberal democratic parliaments want to make sure this type of technology is used appropriately within our idea of the rule of law. That's very interesting things to point out. We're now going to go across to Sayali Borole, who is a smart economy project lead for the Big Innovation Centre, and work focusing on using frontier technologies as a tool for sustainable development and for improving urban governance by building government capacity, and is a smart economy project lead at the Big Innovation Centre and leads the Cities Committee of the Blockchain for Government Council, which explores the role of blockchain and the status of pilot projects in building the capacity of local governments across the UK. Had a really interesting publication recently, Blockchain for Local Government, the Potential Case Studies and Perspectives. Sayali, straight over to you.
Thank you so much, Martin. Like our speakers, Benjamin and Lord Holmes correctly pointed out, there's definitely and certainly the potential for blockchain for the governments. But what I'm going to talk about more is on the adoption side of this technology, what it really means to transfer these words into action, and what relevance does it bring to the application of its areas like identity, digital identity, contracts, smart contracts, registration, and etc. So this potential definitely translate into the benefits, which includes broadly recognized benefits like improving efficiency, administrative efficiency, and a cost saving through reducing the multi-stakeholder need of the multi-stakeholders doing the same task, either in managing the finance transaction or the data exchange. The promise that blockchain for government is bringing is to facilitate services which citizens can enjoy with higher security, fairness, trust, transparency, but especially when there is an interaction with the civic services. And when we talk about civic services, the first point of contact for most of the citizens is the local government or the local councils. And that is why we wanted to really check the relevance of blockchain with the local council and how it reflects upon it. Looking at the current urban governance challenges with which the UK councils are facing right now, the table list is the blockchain application area that can potentially improve those challenges. As the dark field boxes targets the challenges which can be directly tackled with the blockchain as a potential solution, whereas the square frame shows how it indirectly or might be an overspill of the other benefits that the solution is impacting, say for finances into organization or organization into more systemic thing. But I think like Benjamin also pointed out, most of this promised features of blockchain in the public sector can be proved theoretically, and very little empirical evidence is available to support it. And if this technology has to gain the wider acceptance, the adoption process has to be well understood, and the government, in our case for the local council, it is very important for them to understand what are the considerations when it comes to implementing blockchain. What does it really mean? What kind of partnerships are needed? What kind of stakeholder management goes into it? How is that conditions or the ecosystem built to make sure that the adoption is successful, even if it is for the proof of concepts or for the pilot testing to happen. So despite being much discussed theoretically and with limited empirical evidence available, even less for the local governments, and it was very difficult to find case studies which target the specific urban governance challenge across the potential application areas it comes into. It was interesting to see that it was even challenging to find a successfully implemented pilot case study for the UK region. So we looked more into the European case studies, starting from Switzerland, Netherlands, also one from Russia and Spain. The table here identifies the selected 5 case studies which we looked into, along with the urban governance challenges it was facing, and to summarize the general characteristic of these 5 cases, we looked at we looked at the stage of the project, if it is a proof of concept, successful pilot, ongoing pilot, trying to scale it up. What was the user base? What was the arrangement of the stakeholders? What was the regulatory, local and national regulatory environment available for that, or the relevant public body support, either from the central government or maybe the connected council support, which was which does make a difference when implementing a blockchain solution. Overall, briefly, blockchain came as an obvious solution to most of these challenges, except for the Switzerland, where they really wanted to check the digital identity side of the blockchain. And through all these pilots, local councils or the city administrations were really looking to improve the services of their councils, the service delivery and the capacity of an organization to make it better. Undoubtedly, blockchain was beneficial, but saying that all of these use cases and case studies were at the pilot level, and as we scale up, things might change. But so far, it has been improving the efficiency. So we found that to successfully design and implement a blockchain service, local government needs to be mindful of certain aspects. Few of them definitely overlap with Benjamin, so that certainly means what is happening at the national level is reflecting at some level at the local form as well. So public government actors need to familiarize with the blockchain platform and have certain level of understanding of technology, not thorough, but they need to understand and bring up the upskilling to certain extent. There is a need to create a right partnership and a division of roles and responsibilities among the stakeholders and the partners right away. And apart from the resources and the physical demands, it is very important to have the right ecosystem or the right environment even for the blockchain testing to happen successfully. That comes from the behavior, leadership, initiating or encouraging the experimentation of the blockchain, and the regulatory environment which supports around it. And because local government in the UK currently, or since past few years, have been open to experimentation, it was very critical to understand how is all of this adoption really reflecting locally in the UK, for England, for Scotland, and for the other big and small councils, and what can be the potential delay what can be the potential delay of using or piloting this technology when the pressures on these councils are so high. We found out, we spoke to a few of the local councils, including Scottish Government, Audit Scotland, associations like Local Council Association, few of the councils from England, including Stevenage Council, Norfolk Council, and it was very clear that in the current digital strategies or the ICT policies, which are pushing the councils for more innovative, if blockchain technology has not yet even entered the discussions. It is not about proof of concept or pilots, but it is not even taken into considerations as of now. And speaking to them, it was very clear that there is a dire need to share a knowledge on what it means to implement blockchain and what are the learnings or the use cases that they can learn from and reflect into their potential solution finding. It is not just about the knowledge exchange on the technology, but it is also the practical learnings, which are probably not just limited, but we are lacking on to provide or bridging that gap. Understanding the concerns of the local councils, we spoke to few we've spoke to 16 of the blockchain vendors which are based in the UK, and what their perspective was when they are trying to reach the local councils or even with the governments for that matters, to make sure that the testing all the blockchain comes into discussion. The blockchain vendors do agree, solution providers and the platform providers both. We spoke to companies like IOTA Foundation, Algorand, Blockchain Technology Partners, Fifth, Ninth, and many more. So they do identify the opportunity, despite the vendors believe that the public sector is somewhat behind considering to the market developments, which is always the case most of the times. But overall, they think that this is the case currently with the blockchain because of the risk aversion with the technology and the limited engagement from the leaders and the decision makers. So irrespective of a lot of discussion happening at the national level, strategies promoting blockchain and a lot of experimentation in the ministries like HMRC and Home Office, it has not been much reflected below. So going forward, they demanded more collaboration and openness from the local councils, whereas councils are saying we need more knowledge about the blockchain and how it is implemented. So certainly there is a gap in understanding this technology and its implementation and its use, which is obvious and simple to understand. But this gap, this exactly is the gap which is making the blockchain initiative struggle to break through and establish a strong ties with the other local governments. So we along with the stakeholders we spoke to have very simple recommendations, like probably three takeaway and recommendation is to build future collaboration needs to be based on strong knowledge exchange. We need strong testing environments which can be encouraged from the central government and from the other stakeholder. Only then we can create the right conditions for the testing to happen successfully. And we need more openness to understand this technology and benefits. However simple this recommendation and the gap sounds, it is the most difficult to achieve at this point of time because there is no exchange happening. Everyone is talking in isolation and at the independent level. So if we are unable to provide this ecosystem and the necessary environment at local level with the support from national authorities, blockchain will probably see something like what AI has seen, like AI winters, something like that, where discussion goes theoretically on the peak higher side and they drop down. So to make sure that things are happening, we need to build stronger awareness and knowledge exchange along with the ecosystem about it. Thank you.
Sayali, thank you so much. And having been a local government councillor, I'm keenly aware that some of those pressures that you talk about are not necessarily just financial, but they're also demographic, and the changing age of the population, the requirements, the changing needs of public sector delivery, whether it be the NHS, whether it be the cleansing department, and of course across the UK at least there are differing approaches and funding methods for local government across the different nations. And I'm sure that of course will be different across for all of our viewers this evening in whatever nation they're in today. So some very interesting issues you mentioned there, and I might come back to the role of blockchain in prevention, which does take up the negative impact of not dealing with prevention, takes up a lot of local government money, and how maybe DLT might help in that. So thank you so much. We're going to now move on to our next speaker, John Collomosse, Professor and Director in the EPSRC Centre for Decentralised Digital Economy at the University of Surrey. You're very welcome, John. Professor of Computer Vision at the Centre for Vision, Speech and Signal Processing, one of the UK's largest academic research groups for artificial intelligence. John has spent periods of time in the commercial research and development work for Adobe, IBM, Vodafone, HP, and as a member of the strategic advisory team for the UKRI, ICT, and the UK, and I've got to admit, abbreviations, I need to get these right, UKRI Digital Economy Programme as well. And we're delighted to welcome you, John, and straight over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Martin, for the introduction. Gosh, I gave you a few acronyms there, didn't I? My apologies in retrospect on that. Yeah, fantastic. So good evening. Thank you very much for taking the time out this evening to learn about distributed ledgers and blockchain. And I wanted to say a little bit about how we've been using this technology to safeguard the integrity of digital records within public archives, including our national archives. So I'm going to briefly summarize our project Archangel. It was a 2-year project exploring the fusion of artificial intelligence, or AI, and blockchain to help safeguard the integrity and future sustainability of public archives. And it was a collaboration between the National Archives here in the UK, the Open Data Institute, or ODI, which is a not-for-profit based in London, founded by Sir Tim Berners-Lee for open data standards, and also the University of Surrey, where I'm based. So yes, first some brief context and perhaps a clarification. I mean, blockchain is best known as a technology that underpins cryptocurrencies, but blockchain is not inherently a financial technology, and it's a general technology. And this is my kind of one sentence defining appropriate use cases for blockchain. It's a technology that enables multiple independent parties that don't necessarily trust one another to collaborate to produce shared trusted data. So in other words, blockchain enables a decentralized trust model for data. You know, to give a concrete example we're probably all familiar with, you know, Bitcoin is a digital currency enabled by blockchain, but Bitcoins are just digital tokens that people can transfer or pay to one another. The job of blockchain is to track in a secure and distributed way who owns which tokens, but without any recourse to a centralized authority like a central bank. So it's that multiple independent parties collaborating to produce shared trusted data. So Archangel then, our project, was unique in leveraging blockchain for a very different purpose then from financial use cases. It was leveraging it for the public good as a way of safeguarding archive data against tampering and restoring trust in the digital record. And it was funded via a grant of almost £500,000 from the UK Research and Innovation, UKRI, in particular the UKRI Digital Economy Programme via the EPSRC. And this was via a funding call that was issued actually in response to Sir Mark Walport's report Beyond Blockchain, published in 2016, that was really advocating research into applications of blockchain beyond the financial sphere. So, and of course, this was echoed by the report on distributed ledgers by Lord Holmes here, joining us on the panel, which advocates the use of blockchain for the public good, and in particular, this collaborative approach between government and between industry and academia. So you know, blockchain basically is working as a distributed database that multiple parties maintain, as I say, and anyone can read or add data to a blockchain, but once added, that data is immutable. You can never change or delete it. And the idea in Archangel was to combine this blockchain technology with AI, basically to take fingerprints of documents, of records, as they're received into the archive. So these fingerprints uniquely identify the content of the record, and they're immutably stored onto this public blockchain. And that's done at the time that the documents are received into the archive, and then when the document is released, sometimes years later into the public, the fingerprint can be taken again of that record and verified against that original stored immutably on the blockchain all that time ago when it was taken into the archive, and then people can then recognize transparently whether that record has integrity. So why do we need AI to do this? Well, archives have a curatorial duty to keep content viewable with current technologies, and they'll often format shift content over time. So, if you think about video, how many digital video formats have you seen in the last 10 years? They're always changing, technology is always changing. So regular kind of cryptographic fingerprinting techniques won't work. We need a kind of a visual fingerprint of the record that's invariant to, doesn't change, regardless of these kind of benign transformations of the content in the archive. And our solution in Archangel was to train a neural network up, basically a computer vision system to do that, and to store those AI-derived fingerprints into the blockchain. But coming back to blockchain, why blockchain? Why not just create some centralized database of these fingerprints that's managed by the National Archive? And this is really fundamental to the the changing basis of public trust that Archangel addresses. So historically, an archives word was authoritative. But we live now in an age where people are increasingly questioning, institutions and their legitimacy. And Archangel is enabling, through the blockchain technology, a shift from this institutional underscoring of trust, trust me because I'm the archive, to a technological underscoring of trust, in which multiple independent archives collaborate to maintain a blockchain network to underwrite the integrity of their records. So basically, Archangel was deployed for trial across the national archives, not just of the UK, but also of Australia, of Norway, of Estonia, and also of NARA, which is the North American archive in the US. And the trial lasted 2 months and spanned around 20,000 records to kind of feasibility test this technology. So then blockchain is basically useful here because it's open and it's transparent. So anyone can read it, and in our use case, verify archival records using it by fingerprinting those records. But remember, the blockchain is also immutable. So once the data, in this case, a fingerprint, is committed into it, it can't be changed. It would take more than half the parties colluding, in this case, the archives, the part of sovereign nations' public archives, to collude to manipulate the data in the blockchain. So effectively, we've got multiple independent organizations then, as I say, that want to collaborate to create this shared trusted data. And it's a design feature then of the blockchain that each archive is mutually underwriting the archive of another. So archives across the globe are basically helping ensure the integrity of each other's archival data by sharing their fingerprints on the blockchain, but without having to share their actual records themselves. So it's like a kind of federated trust model. So yeah, a few kind of important takeaways then on blockchain, perhaps, evidence through this project. I mean, first of all, on consensus. So, and this kind of, here comes the energy and sustainability aspect of blockchain, the net zero issue, if you like. I mean, those blockchain solutions, these consensus mechanisms underpin the integrity of data on a blockchain, and they're all really a trade-off of different ways to ensure decentralization of trust versus sort of energy efficiency in the consensus. So, so yeah, in mainstream blockchains like those that underpin, Bitcoin or Ethereum, these are really reliant on energy-hungry mining operations to reach consensus that are not, in any way helpful to the climate emergency or net zero. But there are emerging solutions today that fix that. So proof of stake, Ethereum itself is moving to that model. I expect these kinds of blockchain to be mainstream within a couple of years. In Archangel, we chose a consensus scheme called proof of authority for scalability, and that enables this public readability, but only this closed federation of archives to be able to write. And that's also an energy efficient way to deal with this technology. It's kind of important also to note some other limitations of blockchain. One is that large volumes of data can't be stored on it. So it's often better to store data elsewhere, in our case in the archives, but to underwrite the integrity of the data by fingerprinting or hashing that data onto the blockchain. So rather than considering blockchain as a data storage solution, you should consider it as a data integrity solution. And that's what we did in Archangel. Yeah, so I guess, perhaps, finally, I want to flag up that recently Decade is our Centre for Decentralised Digital Economy, was funded also by UKRI, and among other activities, it's exploring Archangel's kind of unique fusion of AI and blockchain technology in new domains, such as journalism, to fight fake news. And I mean, to Lord Holmes' point earlier on pernicious problems to society, yeah, I mean, misinformation, it's a centuries-old problem. I recall when we kicked off Archangel at the National Archives, John Sheridan, the digital director there, was kind enough to pull out like a proclamation against false news from 1688, sort of King James II proclamation. And yeah, digital technology, the ease with which we share and we modify digital content, has created enormous opportunity, but it's also, created a risk that's been amplified as well. And, wouldn't it be fantastic if we found through our archives, through this project, also a solution to tackle, misinformation online through some sort of journalistic blockchain, some way of underwriting the authenticity of content using these open and transparent models. So I'll stop there, but I'm, excited to take any follow-up questions either here or via email.
John, thank you so much. A bit of a challenge, I think, to some of us to think some of these things through, especially you mentioned the concept of data integrity. I thought was a really interesting point about using blockchain DLT as the data integrity and not the data storage, especially around, and someone's already been asking questions about the environmental impact of the technology. And what it always comes back to me is trustworthy knowledge and utilization and how of that knowledge in any sphere, whether it be public or the private. That then goes back straight to what you're talking around to fake news, disinformation, and the utilization of that by a whole range of individuals, countries, non-state actors and state actors as well. So thank you so much for that. We're going to go straight on now to our next speaker, Dr. Tirath Virdee, who's also a member of the advisory board, is the AI capability lead and director of artificial intelligence at Capita Consulting. Is involved in researching, applying and writing about AI, blockchain, quantum computing and cyber security. As a member of the parliamentary groups on AI and blockchain, and also an advisor to my own government in Scotland. I might not be in the government in Scotland because I sit in Westminster, but as mine on AI strategy, and as a director of advanced technology group at Siemens AG. A physicist for the UK Atomic Energy Authority, a breeder reactor program, and as a PhD in engineering mathematics. Tirath, we're going to hand straight over to you.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks, fellow panelists. Hello to all the attendees. I'm going to talk a little bit about Capita, the dimensions of the problem that we have around data, issues around data and data democratization and decentralization, and what we are doing to overcome some of the limitations in generating intelligence from it. And also talk a little bit about how our experience contributes to, issues around national data strategy and how we can democratize government data. Now, not many people know this, but Capita affects the lives of 1 in 3 people in the country every day. And that's because we provide such a vast array of services that are crucial to the people of the country. And this includes, national defense, army recruitment, intelligence, digital policing, provision of social services at national and local level, congestion charging, integrating diverse police force, databases across the country, assessing people for disability living allowance, working with communities, farming communities and environment communities, across the country, providing smart infrastructure, connected devices and so on, enabling pensions for millions of teachers and so on. So the point I'm making is that if anybody knows the problems that we face around the country with data, it is Capita. We face them. And, what surprises me is that both us and our clients have a lot of data, and yet we struggle to make best use of it. Presently, within the sort of guild that I had, which is Data and AI Guild, we are increasingly looking at the dimensions of data and technologies that enable us to generate that intelligence from it in a timely manner. For me, there are really 4 dimensions to data. There are issues of trust, issues of cost, issues of relevance, and issues of strategy. So issues of trust are fairly normal, security and privacy and lineage and explainability and fairness and robustness, reproducibility, legal and ethical frameworks at corporate, national and international level. Issues around acquisition, acquiring data from third parties, acquiring data from clients and so on, the cleansing and the normalizing and the storage and the DevOps stack and so on. Issues about relevance, whether the data is complete, whether, what's its origination, what's its granularity, what are the 6 V's, its taxonomy, its meta tagging, its data quality and so on. And of course, issues to do with strategy, return on investment, the business value, the monetization of it, making sure that, the data one has actually reflects real world data objects. And that for me is one of the big issues, because we end up meta tagging most of these things. And as a consequence, we end up muddying the relationship between the abstract and the real things out there. So issues about ontology become complicated because of meta tagging. And then, getting to that single source of truth. And of course, strategy can't be divorced, from the broader issues that every company needs to tackle, which has to do with, what's your data strategy? What's your data maturity model? What sort of, where you are in your stage in terms of AI maturity, how you're dealing with the ethical and explainability frameworks for AI. And it may seem a bit strange, but those are all really crucial aspects of trying to parameterize your data. Looking around, there are massive volumes of data that are siloed, that are clogging up, today's manufacturing, supply, distribution, user experience, exposing corporations to, real operational risks of latency and high costs and low efficiency and so on. This leads us to consider every network being connected, linking users, applications, ecosystems across blockchain network, using multiple trust layers to facilitate interaction and value creation. I mentioned the national data strategy, and the reason I got a little bit bothered by it was that it didn't really tackle the issues around data democratization. It's like data everywhere and yet not one bit to consume. How is it that you get to the bit of data? How is it that the user gets to the bit of data that they need? And of course, what's changed is that in the past, Google ended up democratizing information for, let's say, 8 billion people. Increasingly, data is being consumed and generated by intelligent systems. And there are trillions of those devices, not billions. So the way it needs to be curated, the way it needs to be consumed, the way it needs to be cataloged has changed. And I think, the only thing that can tackle that are what I call democratization of data. So democratization of data to me is 3 aspects. The first one is parameterizing the data and characterizing it. Google does that through, crawlers and, putting up various parameters. So when we come search for it, we can find it. And they, of course, end up extracting a little bit of value. For data, that's going to be generated by machines, consumed by machines. Humans will occasionally come across it because there's intelligence being generated from it. So that automated AI curated parameterization of data becomes that crucial aspect in the first bit of that data democratization. The second bit of data democratization is that decentralization, using virtualization of blockchain and DLT technologies, as well as independently governed secure data exchange to enable trust. Trust, of course, is really the operative word, as I indicated earlier. And then third aspect of that democratization is really a consent market-driven monetization. Yeah. So when it comes to connecting these assets, there are 2 features that will accelerate the adoption of data democratization, namely digital, decentralized identity management, and then monetization of data ownership. What we are witnessing over the past, I would say, a few years is really the creation of data democratization platforms, whether they're in the form of personal data bots, like in the Flanders local authority, the Estonian digital government, DOEX, AWS Data Exchange, DataX, Convex Global, and so on. Any data exchange that is out there must enable service for cataloging and exploration, a gateway to explore the interrelationships between the data objects, at a most basic level, metadata, at a more complete level, the taxonomy and the ontology of the business objects. The data context, the quality, the analytics, a unified view of data assets, a glossary of the data, pointers to, where the data is coming from if it's not already been copied, data lineage and provenance and decentralized identity management. And, of course, what that enables, for, if you like, more intelligent systems is the ability to create synthetic data for hypothesis generation and proactive action. And then the final stage of that democratization is intelligent data, data that knows itself, data, that almost is singing out at you, this is what I am. And, intelligent systems can consume it in a way that makes sense to intelligent systems. So whilst these exchange platforms have their weaknesses, they make it easy to subscribe to and use third-party data in the cloud. Data democratization, as a term, has changed in its meaning over the past 5 years. And now, it means no more than making data accessible to anybody that needs it, that passes certain hurdles in terms of RBAC and so on. I'm going to cut out a few bits because I know we're running out of time, but, once we move on to that, those data exchanges, and we get to an aspect where we can do data exchange in a way that decentralizes data, then we come on to the question of, so what can the UK government do to democratize that data? If the advantages of democratizing data are really those great, and we can satisfy the issues around trust, what is the UK government doing to democratize that data? There are examples out there in parts of the world where data exchanges are appearing. There's a Japan data exchange. There is one in France to do with the agricultural community where people end up sharing data. There is a Dubai data exchange. There's a South Korean data exchange. I have yet to find one in this country which I can use meaningfully and sort of say, yeah, I've got curated data. I've got data that's been cataloged appropriately. I know I can just throw my AI system at it and get the data I need. I can't do that. And that's, for me, a huge failing. So, that's really, my sort of take from this. How can we enable, the government data to be in an exchange that can be used and consumed as and when needed, and complement it with, if you like, a virtualized layer of decentralization that enables any blockchain or DLT system to be consumed as and when it's required, because no one DLT system is going to end up ruling the world. It's a matter of creating a layer on top that enables these things to be done. Anyway, that's my take on data democratization. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed. Some challenging concepts there, and I know that we have this raises a couple of issues for me about whose data is it in terms of both the citizen and the government, and the right of the government to share that data. So as a parliamentarian, that does pose substantial challenges around parliamentarians' knowledge. But I'm going to go straight to some questions actually, and Tom Pickering, I think Tom's challenge. I've got to admit, Tom's got one very basic question I'm going to pose to everybody first of all, which I think is very useful for this type of debate, because public services are tangible in a sense. They are delivered on the front line, whether it be public sector delivery or they be done by other delivers, the third sector or even the private sector. Tom is cut to the quick here, and he's asking, what is one sensible or successful business opportunity, business case or case study of the technology in the public sector? So first of all, we'll just go around the houses again, maybe start from the beginning for Chris, if you maybe want to come in, if you've got anything to say on that.
Yep, thank you. I think there are a number of very well proven concepts. There's an excellent proof of concept happening in the building trade right now in terms of really seeking to have that real-time traceability and everything logged on a blockchain to address some of the horrific shortcomings which you saw with the tragedy at Grenfell some 4 years ago. I think that's extremely promising and a really good deployment. Right at the beginning of this work, there was a really interesting proof of concept I was involved with DWP, Department for Work and Pensions, where they had a small proof. It was tokenized benefits on a smartphone enabled through a DLT application. The technology worked really effectively. More exciting than that, though, was that within days, those people who previously, largely from a policy perspective, would have been potentially treated as passive benefit recipients, within days of that proof of concept, became effectively active consultants on that project with suggestions. That sense of bringing lived experience. I think there's just two. There could be more, but I will leave it at those two. I think they stand on their own merits.
It's interesting you mentioned Grenfell, because I would also bring in, not as a disastrous in a very different sense, a fire at the Glasgow School of Art. There are many who would say that the utilisation by the building trade of DLT technology it would have enhanced the ability of some of the firing equipment, the electronic equipment, and the trustworthiness of some of that stuff. The case has already been made for that. So I think it's a very interesting link. I'm going to go on maybe to another question, and I'm going to go first to, I think, to Benjamin, in terms of, again, the practicalities of it, the implications, and maybe link also with Sayali. I do remember in the Christie report in local governance and public sector delivery in Scotland back in 2010, which crazily enough I was reading again today. There was a mention back then about the dealing with the negative impact of inequality, for example, here in Scotland back in 2010. The negative outcomes retrospectively absorb 40% of all public sector investment over that period. Now, if you're, for example, in Scotland, England, Wales, anywhere else in the world, where does blockchain and DLT come in to help deliver positive outcomes? For example, preventative measures, say, in public health. The kind of practical examples we can make as political leadership to give in enhancing people's lives. I don't know, Benjamin, have you got anything you want to bring in there?
I mean, that is a huge question, and it's at the heart of the.
That's why there's a politician here.
I mean, it's the heart of the challenge that I ended on. I think in my presentation is about government equipping itself and creating the environment within the public sector where the teams who are trying to address those problems have a really good holistic understanding of the need and are able to work across the government to then bring the right technology to make the difference, but that ultimately they're driven by solving the problem, not necessarily by the technical solution. And I think there's a very important, just echoing what Tirath was saying about the question of data and the need to be able to access that data to solve some of these problems, to understand the problems, and therefore to be able to respond to the problems. And I think there's like a starting point before you get to the technology, which the UK has to address, which is about better getting a handle on the data and the exchange and the collaboration and the visibility to the public and the trustworthiness that comes with that.
Okay.
So I'm sorry not to give you a blockchain answer.
But it's maybe this is where maybe going to Sayali, you'd mentioned in the cities report and some also the international examples, but there was also mention earlier around you said about Estonia and how they utilised DLT technology in a very straightforward manner for securing the data, which then enabled enhanced access to public services. So DLT itself is a part of the answer. It's not this huge, technological kind of step into the dark. It's really a part of the process, the building blocks for enhancing and improving, and I don't think it's efficiency, but actually improving public service delivery on the ground. Is that something you might agree with?
Yes, definitely. I mean, the example when you were, if I was answering the previous question, I was weighing up whether to use Estonia, because I think the Archangel example that John spoke to is an almost direct comparator to that experience in Estonia about securing the integrity of the underlying service rather than being the service itself.
Yeah, Sayali, do you want to maybe come in there on that at all?
Yeah, no, sure. Like I definitely do agree with it, and like before even experimenting or initiating the testing of a blockchain solution, for sure, it is very important to have the prerequisites ready and to keep in mind how do you want to scale it up as you progress the proof of concept or the pilot stage. Otherwise, the level of challenges which the public authorities will face are levels apart, and that might just end up in dissolving the project rather than encouraging it. And then it builds the negative image even more than adopting it in more positive light.
Yeah, I don't know if you maybe agree with me, but maybe natural for me being the co-chair of the all-party group in Estonia, but when they did take on the technology, it was political leadership from the front, which turned their understanding of the technology around through their treasury department, and then had a knock-on effect because everybody saw how effective it was in building trust in the system. I suppose for me, that's one of the key interests for me, is that how it builds trust in a system of government for a liberal democracy. Is that kind of something you might agree with as well?
Yes, I do definitely with you on that one.
Yeah, I maybe I want to just to come into to John as well. If you've got anything to add to that, it'd be great.
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to add on the topic of concrete examples and use cases. I mean, I think, any use case where there's multiple independent organizations that need to, collaborate and produce shared trusted data is one that you can consider, blockchain for, and there's plenty of those examples in the public sector. I mean, beyond, obviously I gave Archangel as one concrete use case. I think supply chain is another great use case. Blockchain enables data with integrity, with provenance, and Lord Holmes mentioned a demonstrator around wine, but actually, more generally, provenance of food, matters a lot to consumers. At each link in the supply chain from farm to fork is an independent organization, and the consumer at the end, they want to understand that provenance. And one of the kind of exciting, at least to me, technical features of blockchain is like smart contracts, which are basically like programs on a blockchain, right? That act, once they're put on there, they act autonomously. And you can think about data as having programmable provenance. As certain events happen, certain actions can be taken by the blockchain, if you like, by the program on the blockchain, which encodes a sort of a business logic in a decentralized way that can be very helpful to supply chain use cases. So.
I know, Birgitte, did you want to come in as well?
Yeah, my comment is in relationship to public procurement, because I think a major issue is here that we shouldn't be overlooking public procurement. And in order for the public procurement department to know how to publicly procure a technology to implement it for the whole nation in certain areas, that can be very challenging, particularly if they don't know what good looks like. So I think that when we do these use cases, they have to communicate with each other. And I just wonder how that can be organized, and how we can actually at the national level or the regional government level get to some standards on what good looks like for the public procurement, so we know exactly what kind of technology satisfies with standards. And there's a major issue here, because technology developers clearly would also want to know what the rules are for public procurement. So I wonder, even if you, Martin, have any views on how public procurement could organize themselves around that, and also if there's anybody around the panels who've got views on that.
I think one of the kind of basic answers, it does require political leadership. And I know I always go back to the Estonian experience, but if there is acceptance that technology exists, it's going to have an impact on a whole range of societies. And I think procurement's one of the most important elements, is that you show political leadership in government. And I challenge not only the UK government, but my own government to get a better understanding of not just DLT or blockchain, but how technology and its utilization can improve public service delivery, how it can stimulate business growth, how it, some people might not like to hear it, but that also means that we get more tax paid, and that means also more financial benefit in the long term for the delivery of public services. I, for one, think that's a good thing. I know we're kind of short for time, but I just maybe wanted to come on for on Tirath's point around democratization of data. And I also think that democratization is a very emotive word. I think it's a word that sometimes means different things to different people. I don't know if I'm getting the terminology right from myself in terms of Tirath, in terms of your principle that you're promoting. For instance, you talked about return on investment. Again, having been involved in local government as well, I'm always very keen to hear about social return on investment. So it's not just financial gain, but it's also about social improvement and reductions in inequality. But I maybe want to, I don't know how we challenge, maybe, do you have an idea about, democratization? What is it? Because I'm still trying to get my brain what you meant by democratization of data, because as a citizen, I'd be slightly concerned that my data might be, for example, in the NHS, being sold to private companies for them to plan what they think are their idea of services.
It's a fair point, Martin. I think, if you go to data.gov.uk, there is just so much data there. So very few people using it. Why? People can't find it. That aspect about democratizing, making it available in a manner that can be consumed has to be the first step. Now, democratization as a word has changed in the past 5-10 years when it comes to democratizing data. Initially, it was just removing unnecessary gatekeepers. Just being able to give other people in your organization access. Now that there is just so much open data, how do you curate it? How do you catalog it? How do you actually move on to that first step where people and systems can find that data as and when it's needed? You can have the data, you can have as much data out there as you want. If people can't find it, it's useless. So that aspect about democratizing it as a first step is a crucial aspect. And then building trust by having, if you like, that virtualization of blockchain or DLT technologies, where it doesn't matter what DLT or blockchain you're using to indicate ownership and usage rights and so on, that then comes in. And if you look at some of the data exchanges, AWS data exchange is not there yet. But if you look at DataX, for instance, or DOEX, DAWEX, they do provide some of these distributed ledger and blockchain technologies to ensure that only people who are supposed to see that data get to see it, that once somebody agrees that they want to buy the data, they can buy it and then they have the rights, whether it's on a basis of a license or complete data, or whether it's like a piece of art that you use and then you have to return it, or whether it's something you take, consume it. So I think the point you're making about privacy and who owns the data, they are well tackled in data exchanges, and increasingly so. I believe that is the route to go.
Thank you. And John, I think you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on democratization of data, I think one of the opportunities blockchain creates is to enable people to have greater control over their data and also greater opportunity to create value from their data. One of the things we're interested in a decade is exploring what we're calling the decentralized digital economy, which is, I mean, we all live in a decentralized digital economy where we can all be producers and consumers of digital services, but those interactions are all governed by largely centralized platforms and, enabled by data effectively, like centralization, siloing of data. So what if, it was possible to, and it is possible through blockchain technology, to enable greater agency over who can use your data, take ownership over your data, maybe commodify your data. We had a project just prior to this centre starting where we were looking at personal wearable data from fitness bands, and the sort of current model for that is a fitness band provider would basically be able to commodify your data to whoever they chose in some cases. And we were looking at a model where you had the producer of the data, for example, me wearing a fitness band, a consumer, which might be a healthcare company, and then a brokering service that enabled basically that healthcare provider to issue requests into the system, say, I'm interested in X people's diabetes data, let's say, and then those people could be offered the opportunity to provide that data in return for some compensation, but also they get agency over which companies might get to use that data. They get the ability to opt out. All of these things that enable data fluidity to create value, enable greater agency that don't exist in centralized platforms. So I think this is another aspect of democratization of data. It's enabling people greater control and agency over their own data, and enabling new business models and new ways to create value as a consequence of that.
I think it's interesting that you said giving people agency over their own data. And I suppose the challenge for people like me, and I hope for all of us believing in liberal democracy, is making sure that everyone has equal access to enable that, and that means to improve, reduce inequality critically in accessing the digital world. Now, I'm often mindful of the challenges. If you look again on one side Estonia, and on the other side we look at the People's Republic of China, and there are different ethos and approaches, and I think I'm often thinking of I think of the old American political theorist Robert Dahl, who used to talk about the pillars of democracy, and I think maybe it's time that we had maybe the digital pillars of democracy to be looked at in more detail, because I think there are some serious huge challenges for those of us in liberal democracies to get a grasp of the opportunity, and also to be a bulwark against different notions of how we can use the technology. I'm very mindful of how some would say that DLT is being used in some parts of China in terms of AI technology and identifying minorities. And I think these are some of the huge concepts and challenges we really need to tackle, maybe at some other point, certainly not tonight. We're up against time, and I'm very grateful to all of you for coming, to Chris, to Benjamin, to Sayali, John and Tirath for being our guests this evening. Again, to all of our sponsors as well. And I know, Birgitte, you may want to say a few words before we bring this evening's meeting to a conclusion.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really an amazing meeting with lots of points in, and I think that when we're writing up the results of the meeting, if we can talk about results, I think that the public management with blockchain is extraordinarily important, both with respect to kind of the blockchain product and also the operations behind the blockchain. But what we really talked about tonight was maybe the protocols, whether it's data protocols and how data are governed, whether it is like value propositions, what is a protocol and what's appropriate technology for appropriate problems, protocols regarding stakeholder engagement around the blockchain. Clearly, we talked a lot about lots of different things. It's very important, I think, that that the technologies that are developing the blockchain are doing, as Sayali mentioned, maybe in other words, and kind of in collaboration with the public sector that is having the problems we need to solve, so public services. But it is also very important that the public services actually understand the technology and how the technology can help them. So to create this kind of ecosystem is extraordinarily important, and then set the protocol. And we need to know also what we've discussed, mentioned the speed of getting blockchain up and running is very important, because it's important for the UK, and it's also clearly important for all the entrepreneurs and the companies we have in the UK. So thank you for this meeting. There's a lot to write up when we start to pick up all the points that have been raised, and thank you, Martin, for sharing it.
Well, thank you, Birgitte, and just to wish everybody a good night. If you happen to be a Scotland fan, bring it on. Fingers crossed. I don't watch football, but anyway, there we go. That's done my bit. Only the odd occasion, international football. So I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe, and a big thank you again to all of our panelists, to our guests for joining us, for you for watching, and also to all the team at the Big Innovation Centre for bringing everything together. So good night, everyone, and see you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.